Today we are talking about how to take radical responsibility for your unwanted manifestations. And I know for some of you guys, this might be a little triggering. This is going to flip the script on you a little bit, but I am just so incredibly honored and excited to be joined by my friend and the amazing Coach Kiki Ura. Thank you for being here.
Hello, dude. The honor is all mine.
We got to hang out recently. Kiki had gone to a coach training that I had been a part of, and then a mutual friend. Like, we were all hanging out at a house, and we got to like really get to know each other on a personal level. And it's just, guys, this is like the power of meeting people in person, live events, all that good stuff. Like, you just create this, especially when it's like your people, you just create that like instant deep connection. It was like, we've been friends for years, right?
That was exactly how I felt. And it was so funny because it was my first time meeting Ashley as well, who was the girl that connected us. And it was such a weird, like, of course, if you two are friends, like we're gonna get along as well. Anyways, it was just so funny. I had such a great time meeting you, and you're like, just, I love meeting people. When you see them online, you expect them to be a certain way. And it was a seamless transition.
Aww.
Thank you for showing up as your true self.
Oh, thank you. Likewise. That truly is one of the best compliments.
It is.
I think that we could either give or receive to other online friends.
I have met some people in real life who are not the same as online, and it's very disappointing.
Yeah, it is. But I over the years, I think I've started to notice that the people that I've met in the beginning, I had a lot more disappointments, and now I've just only been attracting those really genuine people like you that are just exactly who they say they are, and it's just so wonderful.
Gee, thanks.
So yeah, of course. I'm just yeah. So for those people who maybe don't know you or haven't heard of you, I would love for you to just share a little bit about, because you've got this amazing story, and that's really what we're going to talk about today. Because when you shared it with me in person, I was like, wait, what?
I saw your eyes bug out of your head.
I was like, girl, in my head, I'm going, this is a podcast episode. So I would love for you to share like how you, before we even get into like how you got into the online space, we're talking about how to take radical responsibility of your unwanted manifestations. So what's a good place to start with this? Like, because when you were growing up, like many of us, you had some challenges that you were facing and ended up in a place in your early 20s that was rough.
So to speak.
So I would love for you to share a little bit about what that was like and how you started attracting all the things that you didn't want. And it was before you were a conscious creator, consciously aware that we create our own realities. So
totally. And oh man. Okay. So I guess starting at the very beginning is that it's so funny because through my work of self-love and personal growth and development, I have come to absolutely love the person that I am today. So I always call myself like the story of the ugly duckling. Like, I'm not even kidding. When I was a kid, this blonde hair is not real, by the way, but when I was a kid, I had that ugly, like, mushroom cut, the bowl cut. I am a product of the late 80s, early 90s. So
girl, I had a mullet, so we would have been friends. We would have been like hair fail friends.
The two on the playground, like over in the corner, right? Exactly. So like growing up for me, I grew up in a really great community. I did not have it hard by any means, like financially. I went to a great school. I grew up in a well-to-do neighborhood that had a lot of like, I want to say maybe not present parents who displayed certain things that obviously transitioned into their children. And I grew up with a lot of not nice kids. And so I was really picked on as a child. And, you know, my parents eventually, like, if we're going to go into this, we're going to go real deep. So at the age of 13, I tried to take my own life. And it was a really big thing for me because my parents didn't know, no one knew. I didn't even know what I was doing. I took like a handful of pills and woke up the next morning and I was like, I'm still here. And then never thought about doing it again. Like, it was just one of those things where I was like, okay, whatever. And when my parents found out that I had tried to do this, they sent me to therapy. And I think I went to about like 3 sessions. hated the woman. She did not like, her and I did not vibe at all. And then I just went about my life and
Well, wait, so
started.
how did they find out? Did you come forward and tell them?
Yeah, we had, like, there was a conversation one day. My mom had said something, and she goes, "You'd never try to do that." And I was like, "Oh, really?" And she was like, "Wait, what?" And yeah, so there was an attempted suicide. There was self-harming. I used to cut. I used to do all of these things to just try to like numb my pain and avoid my pain, which I didn't realize I was doing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But then as I grew older, obviously I realized, and it was just one of these things that kind of layered on top of each other. So it was then when I got into my teenage years, it was any guy who would give me attention. And my first kiss and the first guy that I slept with was this really big loser. And he was dating all of these other girls. Like, I thought he was the shit when we first met, but he was like my friend's older brother. And like, it was really passe for me to be dating a guy in high school when I was in the 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these things. And so I would just take attention from anyone who would give it to me. And as I got older, then I got into binge eating in university, and then drugs and alcohol. And it finally culminated with a cancer diagnosis. And at that time, it was the brick wall that I needed to hit, because I was doing really irresponsible and stupid stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if am I allowed to swear? I've already
Yeah,
sworn.
we'll put a little we'll give a little like earmuff disclaimer at the
Sorry.
beginning. No, I want you to be as real and open and authentic, because that's the shit was hitting the fan for you.
Yes, that was exactly it.
Yeah.
And so what I didn't realize at the time was that was exactly what I needed in order to take a step back and say, is this the life that I want to continue to lead? Because I was drinking, 3 to 5 times a week. I worked in the service industry. So that is something that you and I share. And in downtown Toronto, if you're in the service industry, you're working in the right bars, you know all of the people who do all of the bad things, because nothing, we used to say, I say now, nothing good happens after 2 a.m. But it was like back then, nothing exciting would ever happen before 2 a.m. All of the fun stuff would happen afterwards.
And so so you would get off of your shift pretty much every time you worked, and then just go and party all through the early morning hours.
All through the night, all through the early morning. Sometimes I wasn't getting home until you would see runners out on the street, and like that, it just like made me feel so gross, but I would continue to do it anyways, right?
Yeah.
Because that's when you're in that cycle. And not only that, it was really cool because, again, that low sense of self-worth, I was meeting celebrities, I was rubbing shoulders with people. It was just like, I felt so cool for the first time in my life. And that was something that really kept me kind of claws in.
Yeah, which is so interesting, because I remember you sharing that when we were in person, and gosh, when I was a server, there were no celebrities in Long Island, New York. Like, that was not the cool people hotspot by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, for you, when there's a lot of money, there's a lot of celebrity, it really makes it adds another layer of complexity to, this rock star lifestyle. It almost glorifies this really toxic environment and this damaging behavior.
And that was the funny thing too, is that at the age of 19, I actually was involved in that. I had the opportunity, I don't know if I shared this with you the other day, but I toured with the Rolling Stones. What? So I went on tour with them. I sold their merchandise. It's all through nepotism. My dad's friend was a promoter for them for like 30 years. And he offered me a job. And of course I said yes. It was my first time leaving North America. And it was a great opportunity, but it also like widened my eyes to this idea of what could I do in this industry? And it's actually the starting point of what led me to everywhere where I am today. But so when I was out of that and then I got back into it in my bartending days, it kind of like brought me back to that familiarity and that excitement that I had been missing.
Yeah. Okay, this is so cool. So then all of this is leading up to a cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
So take us like back maybe a few weeks before that, because I know you had shared with me that you just had a belief that you were going to get cancer, even though no one in your family had this type of cancer or who really even had cancer at all, which I find so interesting because a lot of people will say, well, it had to have been genetic, even though they were speaking it into existence. But for you, there was no genetic link.
No.
So yeah, take us back a few weeks before that diagnosis.
So the funny thing is that I knew that I was heading in a direction that I didn't want to be going in. And I had started by taking control of I started exercising more. I started eating better, not like the best, but eating better, taking control of my health in that regard. And there was just always this weird inkling in the back of my mind. I'm like, okay, so I stopped working out for like 4 years. I eat like crap. I do drugs. I drink a lot. I'm going to end up with cancer. And it was just this, like, it used to be my biggest fear. And that, I think, is something that I want your audience to really know, is that whatever shakes you to your core in terms of fears, find the opposite of it. Start focusing on that, because for me, I would think about it multiple times a week. I would think, just how scared I was of cancer, and like, of all things, or of all people for it to happen to, it would happen to me. It was like a belief that I held in myself. And so when I went to the doctor, I had my neck checked, and she found 2 lumps on either side. And she said, okay, you know what? I'm just going to send you for an ultrasound. I'm sure it's nothing, but just to be safe. And something I also forgot to mention was that I was already in the process too of putting myself into like my own personal form of rehab. So I knew that I needed to leave Toronto. I knew that it was something that was swallowing me whole. So I actually got hired at the time by Carnival Cruise Line and went to go work for them. So I was in the process of all of this, making this massive transition and shift in my life. And then I get sent to have an ultrasound. The woman who's scanning my neck literally goes, and I look at her and I said, I'm sorry, what? Like, what do you see? And she goes, oh, I can't tell you that. The doctor has to. And I'm like,
You just
what?
want to like shake the person.
Pretty much. Yeah. So I was like, okay, so I knew in that moment that it wasn't going to be good news. And then I got a call from my doctor who was sending me to an oncologist. And in that moment, I was like, okay, here we go. And so when I was diagnosed with cancer, I actually wasn't even surprised, which is like the biggest thing, because
it was already inevitable. It was already like a done deal for you in your mind. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So it wasn't, of course it's scary, but it wasn't this earth-shattering news to me.
Interesting. Yeah. And at that point, were you aware of manifestation and how your words, like if you guys have not listened to any Dr. Joe Dispenza, or actually even E-Motion, there's an amazing documentary that speaks to this and has all different doctors and experts and studies around the way that our thoughts and the things that we speak aloud and things that we think in our minds, how it impacts the cells in our body, and how our cells will literally respond to what we are saying. And it doesn't have to be something on the extreme end of cancer, but it could just be like, my body holds on to fat. I can never lose the weight. And your cells are like, got it.
Yep, absolutely. It's
Heard
so
that.
Crazy. Yeah. It's so crazy. And that was something that I was totally unaware of at the time. I had watched The Secret when I was probably like 22, 23, and this was the age of 27. I got the diagnosis just after I turned 28. And I never really put 2 and 2 together. I had seen it. I thought it was cool. And then it kind of went into the back of my head, never to be thought of again. And as soon as all of that started happening, after I was actually very lucky. I had my thyroid removed and had to do like 1 round of a mild radiation, and that was it. No chemo, no hair loss, no, bedridden days or anything like that. So I'm so insanely grateful. But the funny thing about where my cancer manifested was that it's in the throat chakra. Your thyroid is part of your throat chakra, which is linked to communication and not speaking your truth and holding on to these past traumas that had happened and never healed them, never spoke about them, never dealt with them. And so it all just, and this is even funnier, is that I used to lose my voice once every 3 months. I went to an ENT. They couldn't tell
no explanation.
Me. No explanation whatsoever. I used to lose my voice once, almost every 3 to 4 months. And now, not a thing.
That is wild.
Yeah.
That is wild.
Because I'm a loud person. I like to talk. I'm boisterous. I'm extroverted. You know this. So
I love it. Yeah.
But I thought that was just related to who I was as a person. And then after doing this work, after realizing the energetics of everything, it was all kind of culminated. And I was like, oh, I haven't lost my voice since I had maybe once.
Wow.
Since I had my surgery, I hadn't lost my voice.
That's wild. So I'm curious, how did you get to the place, like post-surgery, you were already kind of leaning into that recovery, putting yourself in a cruise line version of rehab where they're going to like drug test you, like, I cannot, so how did you get to that place where you are now, where you started learning about personal development and spirituality and energy and metaphysics and all of this good stuff?
Well, this is where our paths cross again, in that I joined this network marketing company and they preached the power of personal development. I know that you're open with who you used to work. Yeah. So Jen and I used to both work for Beachbody, and the Beachbody was how I came across Jen as well. And so, I've been following your journey for years, and I only started though in 2016. And that was right after I had my thyroidectomy October 19th of 2015. So when I moved across the country out of Toronto, I moved to the middle of nowhere, northern British Columbia, up by Alaska, moved there to be with a guy that I had met that I actually manifested into my life. And this was before I was conscious of manifestation, but I did. And when I moved out there was I was like on the health kick. I wanted to keep myself healthy and fit. And there was no access really to like classes. I was so spoiled living in Toronto, and I didn't have any access to that. Their idea of hot yoga was literally turning the radiator up in the room of the rec center.
I was going to say in the library basement.
It might as well have been, right? So that was a really interesting experience. And my girlfriend reached out to me and she goes, listen, I'm doing this challenge group. Do you want to be part of it? I said yes. The next month I signed up to be a coach. And that's when I discovered personal development. And in the maybe first 2 months, I was like, I don't need this. I'm too good for this. I've got my shit figured out. I'm fine. But when I saw the power of it, and I read You Are a Badass. I hated reading, but I read You Are a Badass. It took me a year to read, but I loved it. So I kept going back, month after month to try to get
a few more pages in. Yeah,
pretty much.
Oh, that's so funny. So that was your first introduction to manifestation.
Yeah, I discovered manifesting. I watched The Secret again and discovered. I can't remember. I came across Catherine at some point, the manifestation babe, and really went into that. I bought her book, and I realized maybe like in and around spring of 2017 that this stuff like actually works. I manifested $22,000 in 2 months, and like going through her book. And I realized at that point that I had actually manifested Josh into my life, because I wrote this list, and I had done it maybe a month before I went out to BC to visit some friends before going on the cruise ship. Met him, got on the ship. 3 months into my contract, I thought to myself, the list. And he checked off every single thing that I had written down.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really freaking cool. I think what's so awesome to hear about your story is that like for a lot of people, they're like, it can happen overnight. It can happen quickly. And then it can also happen incrementally. And for you, it really was like that compound effect, that compounding of one piece of knowledge, one positive action step on top of itself. And, you know, in our online marketing world where everything is like instant gratification, people want it and they want it now. And I think you're really modeling like consistency, and just showing up for it really is the fast way to get there.
It is. And it has taken, it's literally like compounding. It's the building blocks, right? I started with podcasts, and then I incorporated books, and then I started meditating. And when I was in my 9 to 5, that was about all that I could handle. I could handle my workout, like my daily non-negotiable, and meditation, because I really started to notice the effect that it had on my life of like, I am so much more calm when like this stuff works. And it's crazy to see that now, like I think 3 days away from 100 days of meditation in a row. And this is like by far, I think before I started this challenge, the most I had ever done was like 30 something. So I am like deep in it right now, and I am obsessed with it. And I think
this I find so amazing. I'm like, I accept the challenge. What are some things that you've seen shift?
So I will tell you the exact moment I realized that meditation works. And it is the most ridiculous story, but I love it because, okay, so I always joke with people, like if you know me on a regular level, like if you follow me on social media, you'll always hear me saying that I am not meant to be Canadian. I am not meant to live in the snow. When I moved across the country, I moved to a town called Kitimat that I did not know at that time, literally from the First Nations language, directly translates to people of the snow. It was the worst thing I could, like, I left Canada to not experience winter, meet a guy, move to winter central.
Land of snow, yeah.
Land of snow. And when I moved there, I had to obviously, like, you shovel your driveway when there's snow, but there was just so much snow. And I remember even as a kid growing up, being like 7 years old, my mom would make me go out and shovel the driveway, and I would come back in tears because I hated shoveling the snow so damn much. So then I moved to Kitimat, and my driveway is like a front lot. And this was the year that I started meditating. Like, I'm not even kidding you. When I would go out and shovel the snow, like I would be one of those people that was just like, okay, just get this done. I would like lean into it with my stomach. I would give myself the Heimlich with the shovel handle. I would always slip and fall no matter what. Like, that was something that I spoke into my existence.
Yeah.
And then the year that I started meditating, shoveling snow was like, as I hated it, but it was peaceful. It was calming. And I was like, who am I? Like, I did not recognize myself in my own body when I had this stark realization. So that was one of the things, but I am able to handle things so much more calmly now. And I approach things with a non-reactionary approach. So many people are so reactive in today's day and age. And I'm someone who, I'll take a step back, I'll take a breath, I'll be like, okay, try to see all sides of the equation and then give my response.
Yeah. And when I met you in person, I totally got that very grounded sense from you, but you also very much live in your feminine energy, especially in your work, which I'm like, you do have that really like beautiful balance of both.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It has not been something that I have always lived with. So, and that's why I think everyone should meditate. It's such an important aspect of living just a blissed out life.
Amen to that. I love it. So I'm curious for you, how do you define manifestation? Because I realize we've been throwing around this word, and there's some people listening that are like, okay, right, but what exactly is it?
Right. So manifestation is pretty much energy. And rule number one of manifestation is, there's there's a couple different sayings, but what you focus on expands, where attention goes, energy flows. So the way that I like to describe it is that your thoughts, you are the owner of your thoughts. You control your thoughts. They're not just random things that get plopped into your brain. You are the owner of your thought patterns. So your thoughts then affect how you feel. If you have good thoughts, I woke up, it is miserable here today in Toronto, and I woke up in such a grateful state. I woke up excited, which doesn't happen all the time, but I was like, this is weird because on rainy days, it never happens. So I woke up in just such a great state of mind, but that was because I had positive thoughts going on before I went to bed last night. So your thoughts create your feelings, which then your feelings are going to determine how you act. If you don't have great thoughts, you're not going to have good feelings, and you're not going to want to have the motivation or the initiation to go and do what it is that you have to do, which then leads to your results. So you are the owner, you are the creator for everything in your life, and you have to show up and take radical responsibility for your life circumstances.
Yes. And I think one of the things with that is for people who have attracted, or what you talk about a lot, is that people will celebrate the positive things that they've manifested. And I'm putting, if you can't see me, I'm putting positive in quotation marks, the things that they desire or think they want, they will celebrate that. Oh, I manifested X, Y, and Z. And then the things that they don't want in their life, it's like, well, how did I get this parking ticket?
Yes, exactly.
And then anger and like pissed off that this is happening. So how does somebody that's newer to manifestation go from, okay, I'm taking ownership for the things that I'm thinking about and creating, which are manifesting in my physical reality. How do you help somebody get over that gap of really owning all of the things they're manifesting?
It took me a really long time to realize that I attracted cancer into my life. Despite the fact that it wasn't a surprise when it came into my life, I had to take a step back and look at, okay, personal development helped me to really hone in on what it is that I had gone through in my life and helped me to heal my past. And I think that if we don't do that deep inner work, you're not going to be able to move yourself forward in life. And that is a hurdle that a lot of people don't really realize when it comes to manifestation. We have to, so for example, I used to, and this is not something that I talk about very often, but I have in the past, I used to drive myself home after a night of partying from downtown Toronto to Etobicoke, where I lived. And that is not a long drive, but it is definitely one that is on the highway. And I was putting myself, not only myself, but others in danger. And thank God nothing ever happened. But now as like a woke person, when I first started personal development, I used to get such a pit in my stomach. I used to just feel so much shame and guilt and remorse for the actions that I took when I didn't realize why I was doing them. And there was just something that would come over me. It wasn't even like, I would never consciously drink and drive, right? So there was this part of me that really had to heal that past. And the piece that had to be healed was forgiving myself. And so many people have such difficulty when it comes to holding on to feelings of guilt and shame and remorse, because they think that they have to berate themselves for the actions that they've taken. They think that they have to, it's part of their story, so they have to hold on to it. And when you do that, you are keeping yourself in the past and you're not allowing yourself to heal and move forward. And that is such an important piece to the manifestation. I hope I answered your question.
Oh, this is so good. And I just got chills. The forgiveness work is so incredibly powerful. And it really does come down to, there are other people in your life that you may need to forgive, but oftentimes it really comes back to forgiving yourself.
Totally.
Even if it's someone else that you feel wronged you, a parent, a friend, whoever.
And the hardest thing to ever have to do is forgive someone who's never said sorry.
Oh, yes. Oh,
I have
yeah.
worked through that many times in my life.
Yeah. That's
So yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
And I had to do some really big forgiveness work, probably about a year and a half ago around my business. And that was like, it was almost like the bottleneck in my business. I was the bottleneck because I had not done that work, and I was holding on to this resentment and this pain. And it wasn't until I really stepped into that. And it was I was so surprised. It brought up a lot of emotion. It was some of the scariest work I had ever done. When I was finally able to have that conversation and release that, I was finally able to recognize that it actually had nothing to do with the other person, and so much more about that I was mad at myself for not knowing better. And that's what I was really beating myself up about. Like
You're
drinking and driving, it's like
so
beating myself up because I know I have a moral compass. I know I shouldn't be doing that.
yes.
And I honestly think after I had that experience, I recognized like, wow, I think that actually is really the core. I can't speak for every situation, but more often than not, and I remember going into that situation, I had to have a conversation with someone, and spoke to some friends about it beforehand. And they said, realize it's not about how they respond. If you're going into the conversation expecting them to say, I'm sorry, or expecting them to forgive you, then you're not really there to do the work. It's
right.
for yourself. It's not for them. If they want to be freed from it and they want wholeness from it, that's on them.
Personal development has such a light and airy title that it's almost misleading.
Yes.
Because it is about the nitty freaking gritty work and the deep, hard stuff. And if we were to talk about all the pain and all the things that you're going to go through when you get onto this journey, no one would ever do it.
Yep.
It's not a high selling point to the personal development field. And that was, I think, one of the hardest things, because I personally know someone who has died from drinking and driving. This is something that I held on to, that I said to myself, if I let go of this, if I forgive myself for this, I am a bad person. I did wrong. I should suffer. I should be in pain. I clung onto that because it was all that I knew. And every time I would think about it, I would get that pit in my stomach. And I was like, I need to own this, because this is what I did. And this is my, this is what I have to live with for the rest of my life, because that's my punishment, so to speak. But when I learned to move past that and flip the script around it, I can talk about now how I've done the work, and I can speak to others about healing themselves for things that they have done wrong in the past that is no longer a part of their life or their story. Right. And really allow them to help, I help my clients with this to move through these past struggles so that they can get on the track of moving forward in success.
Oh, this is such a good conversation. I feel like we just took a turn
We did.
in such a beautiful way. Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad you're talking about this and that you speak to this with your clients, because I don't really see a lot of people getting into really sharing the experiences of the nitty gritty and how uncomfortable it can be. And I find that even for people who take my business course, they come into it and they're like, why does this have to be so hard? Why does this have to be so confusing? And all of these stories and things are coming up. But I think at the end of the day, if I'm sure you have a similar experience, looking back on all the personal growth and the uncomfortable moments, the pain really came from not dealing with it sooner.
Totally.
Like the actual conversation of forgiveness that I had to have, I knew I got clear that it was a conversation that needed to happen about 2 weeks before I actually did it. So I had spent months in pain, then 2 weeks delaying the inevitable, and then going, all right, Jen, you're either going to continue
time to go
for another week, or you're going to pull the trigger. Like, what's it going to be? And I just think that's like the strategy, unfortunately, that so many people play out, that they just play the waiting game. And then they go, well, change is hard. Well, change only feels hard because you're not actually making the change can happen in a second.
Correct.
It's the waiting to change and knowing you need to change. And what if I can't change? And what if it doesn't work because I'm not good enough? That's the pain.
The thing that I also want to say to that is that we we love to play this story in our heads of
Yeah.
what the outcome is going to be. And I know this person, so they're going to react like this. And this is what they're going to say. And I can't do this because like, I'm just going to blow myself up. Like it's going to, you know, erupt kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like there's not going to be a good outcome to this. But in reality, that is us projecting our own fears onto the other person, because more often than not, it doesn't go that way. It goes much better than you could have ever expected it to. And it's like, oh, so I just kept myself in this state of fear and suffering and pain way longer than I had to for no reason.
Yep. And exactly what you just said is manifestation. We create this picture in our mind. We're coming up with this story. We're playing it out. That visual is becoming a belief, something that we're anchoring in to be, well, this is how it's going to go. I can't have this conversation because this is how they're going to respond. It creates a state, shows up in our behavior, and then it gives us a certain result. And so it's like, you can look at it through the woo-woo, like vibration manifestation of the spirituality, or you could just look at the science and the psychology of it. Like it works. It's the same no matter which way you enter the conversation. But yeah, it is so powerful to be able to recognize those patterns in ourselves and just really ask better questions. Like some people were in my Pitch Your Niche course having a moment, and they're like, I'm confused. And they're like, well, I don't know. I'm stuck. I'm struggling. And I just said, I posed the question. I said, hey guys, what happens immediately after confusion? And they all went, breakthroughs, freedom, clarity. And I'm like, all right, so now that you consciously recognize that, why are you guys trying so damn hard to avoid confusion? Why are you trying so hard to avoid it and run from it? And they were all like, oh shit, like you just called us out so hard. And I was like, you just called yourselves out.
Right. That's totally true.
Yeah. But I just find that it's so interesting. Like once we even understand how all of these pieces fit together, like knowing something is not mastery of it. And that can be pulled into like the world of coaching, where there's coaches who know a lot of information, but they're not living their message. And I think that's why I love you so much, because you've lived before you even knew you were living it.
Yep.
You were living it. And you've gone back in hindsight and pulled all the pieces together, and you're like taking full radical responsibility for what you created.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're so welcome.
I'm just taking that all in right now.
Just take it in. Just take a moment to receive that. But I'm curious to hear from you. Is there anything else that like we really didn't get to speak to yet that you feel really called to share with the audience today?
I always try to leave anyone's audience that I speak to, I always just really try to leave them with this idea that we have the power to create our realities. And I know that we talked about this a little bit, but you know, my life looks so drastically different than what I thought it was going to look like. Mm-hmm. And we have to learn how to grow through what we go through, right? Yeah. I have taken this idea of like one of the worst things that can happen to someone, and aside from like death, and be on the brink of that and go through that and work through it and do the personal work to come out on the other side and say, this was actually one of the greatest things to ever happen to me. Yeah. And I would not be where I am today without that diagnosis. I would not be where I am today without going through all of that shit of like, I was also in like an emotionally abusive relationship for 7 years, the drinking and driving, the 10 years in the bartending industry, all of that got me to where I am today. So just please always know that whatever is happening in your life, it is never happening to you. It is always, always, always happening for you. And that's a huge part of manifestation as well.
I'm so glad you just said this, because specifically there was someone who's in my coaching program who did an exercise where she wrote out her timeline. She was working on developing some stories for social media content. And she said, how do you, I forget the exact words that she used, but she was having a difficult time now looking back on all of her past experiences and having a lot of negative emotions come up about, oh, well, this was my life. How do you guys look at that and not feel sorry for yourself or not feel angry or not feel shameful? And I was like, girl, you got social media content for days. Like,
Yeah.
you got the full, you didn't even know you had the rags to riches story. And now, I was like, you're in a good spot. I was like, once you know all the stuff, you can't go back. But
Totally. And you just have to use it to your advantage. It's part of who you are. It's part of your message. Use it. That is the power of storytelling. And I think that's something that I do really well. If I'm going to like pump my own tires, I tell stories, and but it's always come naturally to me. I have always been a natural writer. So it's funny because everyone's like, when are you writing a book? And that is like such a far in the future thing, because I can't fathom, like some days I can't write. It takes me an hour to write a post sometimes. So the idea of writing a book is very far out there, but it's
what if it didn't have to be written? What if it could be spoken and transcribed? There's your book.
Oh my God. That actually I've never thought of. And I'm so grateful that you just
I'm like, I have to say this for you and for anyone else listening who hates, because I hate writing. I don't write blogs. That's not my jam, but I could talk all day, and things that I speak, I'm like, I said that. Okay. That's pretty smart, because I'm just channeling, I'm just going.
That's what happens to me too. I got off of a podcast interview with Erin, and I said to her, I was like, I think that's the best podcast I've ever done. And I said, I don't remember a thing of it.
And that's how you know you were just in flow.
You black out.
Yeah.
It's crazy. There's like this sheet that comes over and you're like, what did I say? And you listen to it afterwards. You're like, all right.
Look at me.
Cool.
That's me. Okay. Yeah. A friend of mine, she wrote a book, and she said that, instead of sitting, she was on the podcast and she was very transparent about it, which I so appreciated, because I think other people like want you to be like, look what I did. I wrote this book, when they have a ghostwriter. And what she did was, she's like, I had all these courses and I had all this content from, 20, 30 years of my experience. And she had somebody going through and sourcing all of her content, going through all her live videos, all of her course videos, and just pulling for each chapter the most relevant things. And then she'd go in and tweak them and review them. It was all in her own words, just reformatted. And that was her book. So
I am doing this.
Yeah. I'm like, I just want to say, like, it's so easy to say to ourselves, oh, that's going to be hard, or this, but it's like, but then you realize that other people are not making it hard because they're getting help, and you're like,
and that's not something I ever thought of. So thank you for putting that onto my map.
You're welcome. Like, behind the little sneak peek behind the curtain.
Book is coming soon, guys.
Book is out next week. First chapter, you can opt in. Oh my God. But yeah, you just never know, guys. So don't put it out there that it's got to be hard, because you just put it out. You just manifest.
And I am such a queen of, like, I am so good. It's so funny. When you are a coach, it is so easy to teach other people. And like, then you go and you do something and you're like, yeah, this is what I teach people on. So hard to do it for yourself sometimes.
It's true.
Oh,
maybe not. I'd like to believe. How do you keep your pathway open to receive manifestations by not putting so many expectations on it?
Oh, so good. So I am actually working through this right now, because I am trying to manifest my largest month in my business. And last month I just manifested my largest month in my business. So I'm trying to grow it again. And it's something that you have to have this balance of it, right? This is what I am learning, because you have to have focus on your goal, but you also have to release. And this is where, journaling really helps. This is where sitting and visualizing like yourself already having it, and then just letting go of how you think it is supposed to come to you, because that is the biggest manifestation faux pas that I see so often, is people think that they know best and that it's got to come by this day, and it's got to come this specific way with this color bow on it. And that's just not how it ever happens. Like 9 times out of 10, it doesn't happen the way you ever think it's going to. And so you have to release the expectations of the how and time. Those are
the time is a big piece. Like, what if it happens faster than you think it's going to happen?
Right.
Like, are you available to that? And I think a lot of times it's like, well, I can only make $1 million in 5 years or in a year or whatever it is.
Right.
Like, well, what if you sign a deal tomorrow and make $1 million? Or what if like some extended family member passes away? Like, are you open to receiving like $1 million from somebody you didn't know before? Like, there's so much possibility that we close ourselves off to. And to add to what you just said with Lupina's question around this, it really is like getting clarity around what you want, and then practicing detachment from the outcome. Because I think what happens for a lot of people when they start obsessing over a picture, I talk a lot about your success is state dependent, because when we can think about ourselves with $1 million, like I'm gonna have $1 million business. And in one thought of that, we could be high vibe, we could be experiencing it as if it's already happened. And then the next day we go, well, it's not here yet. Well, let me think about that picture of me with the $1 million business. But then the energetic vibration around that picture is now in a different place. And the pictures that we create and the thoughts we create, thoughts become things, what you focus on expands. We also want to be looking at managing our state throughout all of that. And if you're thinking about something, like a lot of times people don't recognize, like, well, I don't want debt. I don't want debt. Why am I not making money? I'm like, well, you're focusing on the debt. And the more you focus on the debt, the more you are in the energy of the debt, the more you're going to get debt. And so I think that's just like 101, like the most basic approach.
So this is the other thing that I want to say to that. And I'm happy that you kind of pulled this around for me, because so often we think that if we are experiencing a low vibe, like negative emotions, that we can't manifest. And I literally just went through this on Monday. I took a full step back from my business. I literally stayed in bed all day and numbed out on Netflix because there was a very terrible tragedy that happened on the weekend up in Kitimat, and I lost an acquaintance of mine, but he had recently just come back into my life. So there was a huge thing for me in that moment of saying, oh my God, like, I feel so bad, but I know I have gone through this. I have done the work, and I know that was what I needed to do in order to move through the emotions. Because what happens is we think, oh my God, in order to manifest, we have to be high vibe all the time, and we've got to be happy, and things have to always be going our way. But that's not life. That's not the truth. The truth is that you have to take the good with the bad. You have to go through the negative emotions to really appreciate the high ones. So instead of tabling your emotions, instead of putting them on the back burner, allow yourself the grace and the space to really move through them, because that's actually what keeps you in alignment. And manifestation is not about high vibe. It is about being in alignment with your desires. And so when things come up for you, you're still being in alignment by honoring them and working through them. A freaking man.
Yeah, there was a thing that I saw a couple months ago about the power of positivity movement, and how it's kind of swung in the opposite direction, where now it's this glossed over idea of be positive all the time, and how that's actually creating more of a problem for people, because they're not allowing themselves to sit in the discomfort, sit in confusion, sit in processing their shame or their forgiveness work or whatever it is. And they're just like, oh, let me get out of this. Got to get out of this. I don't want to manifest the wrong thing. Got to be happy, happy, happy. And it's like, oh God, that's not a good,
it's like becoming like a Stepford wife, or like the properly presented, just like homey woman all the time. Right.
Yeah, like this like fake curated personality.
And you are not a cookie cutter. Like, you have real raw emotions, and you have to move through them, because like I said to myself, I can either avoid this and it's going to affect me for a few days, or I can really just sit in the emotions, cry my heart out, and then probably feel better tomorrow because I've gotten it out of my system. And not to say that that's how everyone deals with it, because sometimes people are in shock when they hear news like this, right? So you kind of like walk around glazed for a day or two and you don't cry, and that's okay too. This is something that I was talking to my community about this week, is that there's no one right or wrong way to grieve. Just know that when these emotions do come up for you, to honor them when they do.
And acknowledge them and honor. This is so good. And it's so interesting, because as human beings, we're the only species that will hold on to things and revisit things. And like we were talking about earlier, the shame and hammering away, like I should be punishing myself ongoing for something that I did 15 years ago.
Mm.
And if you look at animals in the wild, like a swan, for example, if they get in a fight in the water, they do their thing, they fight it out, and then they turn and go their separate ways, and they'll flap their wings in the water, not go fly, but they'll flap their wings to release that excess energy, and then they're good.
I
They
love that.
let it go from their bodies instead of holding it on, which brings us all the way back full circle to the beginning of when we don't release and process that emotion, it stores in our cells because it has nowhere else to go, because energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transmuted. So if you're not releasing it and you're holding it in, and you're somebody who feels like you have an anvil on your chest all the time, well, you're storing something potentially in your chest, or you feel like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders, or you have tension in your neck, or your hips are really tight. Like, where do you, I was talking about this with a couple of different friends, because we were doing, one of my good friends, Emily Aarons, took but the mastermind peeps through this like chakra releasing thing. And we were all like, oh, wow, this is where when I talk about this thing, or when I think about this thing, this is where I feel pain. And so it's like, well, okay, that's like, if you get really intuitive with your body and you really like tune in, it's like, oh, this is where I am holding that unresolved experience. It's so fascinating.
That's what I loved about NLP when they were talking about all of that stuff, that you can actually like transmute all of that and get rid of it and never have to deal with it again, and not have to have surgeries upon surgeries upon surgeries for the rest of your life and do all of this stuff. So it's really powerful. And it's funny, so I heard this thing, and I'm not a science person, but I heard this thing the other day about how like our lymph nodes, or our lymphatic system, carries about like 10 liters of fluids in our bodies. And that's why it's so important to move your body and to constantly be getting up. And it's funny because I was like, I'm someone who gets curious, and I do little experiments. So I noticed that I was weighing myself, and I don't do this very often, but I'm trying to get back into shape. So I weighed myself usually in the mornings when I wake up. But then the other day I went to a hot yoga session. I came home and I put myself on the scale again, and I actually had lost 1 pound. And I thought that was so fascinating, that in 1 hour, and I was like, okay, well, it was hot yoga, so you're sweating and all of it's really coming out. But yesterday I went for a run, and I only went for like 2K. And I came home, put myself on the scale in the morning, and after my run, same thing. I had lost like 1.5 pounds. And I'm like, this is really the power of moving your body, because I always work out in the mornings. I find that it gives me energy throughout the days. But that's also a great way to release your stuck energy, like flapping the wings, right?
So interesting. This is so crazy, because literally yesterday I did a really, really, it wasn't hot yoga, but I did a deep yoga with Adriene. Shout out to Yoga with Adriene on YouTube. And it was like a 45-minute thing of like really like getting in there. And it was one of the deepest stretches I'd done in a really long time. And I'm really getting back into being consistent with workouts. And normally when I go to hot yoga, when I come home, if I go in the morning, I'm exhausted the rest of the day, and I'll end up sleeping for like a few hours. And if I go at night, the next morning, I end up having to take a nap that day, because my body's just releasing so many toxins, and I really try to honor that. And so yesterday I did this really intense yoga. I had done one the night before and then the next morning, and I had to take like a 3-hour nap. And I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, I don't know and then I went, oh, I literally just moved my lymphatic system, because it doesn't move on its own, you guys. You have to, like, through movement and like through water and all these different things, like and saunas and whatever, like that's how you can release toxins from it. And so it was like, oh, damn, I had some toxins that I just released into my body that I'm like getting out. So I was like very excited about that. But it was really interesting to, again, coming back to this of really just acknowledging and checking in with the body and saying, well, whoa, this feels weird. I could have pushed through and continued working and did live videos and fought the tiredness, but instead I just decided, like, well, a question I've been asking myself is, what would the $10 million version Jen do? And I was like, she would take a damn nap. Like, she would go and rest her body. And that's exactly what I did.
Damn Skippy.
Damn straight, yo. This has been such a powerful conversation. I am just so grateful. I know that people are like, OM freaking G. Yes. Breakthroughs. Guys, if you've had some big breakthroughs, you need to come and chat with us over on Instagram. Take a screenshot of the podcast, or if you're watching live, tag us at Hey Jen Casey and at Namaslay.
Namaste babe.
Oh, Namaste babe. Just kidding.
Namaste babe.
Namaste babe. I just really gotten very excited about Namaste, which I just love so much.
Well, thank you very much. It has been such an honor to be here. I just love you so much.
I just love you so much. I can't wait to hang out with you again in person.
You're coming to Toronto.
Making it happen. Making it happen. Any last like quick nugget or one zinger takeaway for people who are listening today?
One of the fastest ways to manifest is to do more of the shit that makes you happy. So lean into that.
Get in the high vibe. I love it.
And get grateful.
Yes. Oh, gratitude. That is like
gratitude is so gangsta.
Gratitude is so gangsta. Gangster. I don't know, the spiritual gangster people that you are. You never know. Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited for people to hear this episode and for them to have massive ahas and breakthroughs. So thank you for sharing your story and helping to facilitate this magic today.
Thank you for having me. Love you.
Love you. So people, they can go find you over on Namaste Babe on Instagram. Where else can they go and hang out with you and connect with you?
I have a badass community of amazing women who are inside the Namaste Babes with an S community on Facebook. And of course, I am Kiki Ura, Ura on Facebook. So you can find me there and add me as a friend and let's hang out.
Woohoo! Awesome. Go follow her stuff. She's absolutely amazing. And we can't wait to hear what you guys think of this episode, some of your biggest breakthroughs. Let us know either on live video in the comments below. Pass this on to a friend who needs to hear this today. Hang out with us on Instagram and let us know. I can't wait to chat with you guys more. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.